I think the more writers understand that this is the process, the less, and I'm not saying there aren't writers who don't edit as they go. Walter Mosley says that when he finishes a manuscript, it's done, it's ready, because he's been editing as he goes. If that works for a writer, great, but it is not without editing. The only writer I have ever once years ago interviewed Edward Albee, the playwright, and asked him about his revision process, of course. And he says, just a moment of silence, and he goes, I don't do revisions. And I was like, well, okay, Edward Albee, I'm not going to argue with you, but I have read your plays and I'm betting you do, at least in some way.
I think that was just kind of a marketing ploy that he was saying that.
I don't know. Some authors do that. Walter Mosley, I mentioned a minute ago, I think the world of his writing, but I was at an event once where he talked about, somebody asked about what happens if he turns the book in and the publisher thinks that there is some editing or revision needed. And he said, oh, well, in that case, I tell them I'm happy to take the book somewhere else. And I went, okay, which is a slightly different thing, because I do think he's a very tight writer. And I do think there's editing that happens as he goes. I write a monthly feature in my blog called How Writers Revise. And I ask successful authors to tell us a little bit about their revision process, because I think everybody does it differently. And some do it as a separate process. Some roll it all in together while they're writing. Some do it little by little as they go. It's whatever works for you. But the other thing I wanted to address about what you said is 3 decades of editing and revising. That isn't necessarily the case. And it's also not a sustainable business model. So yes, editing and revising take time. When I work with a publisher, we generally allot, I would say 6 to 8 weeks minimum for it. But that's really right about where we stay, rarely longer than 3 months. So it's not a drawn out process, but it is an intensive one. But the beauty of it to me is that I think drafting is the hardest part. You're creating something out of nothing. The hardest part in the sense of coming up with the story you wanted to tell. I think editing and revision is the most demanding part,